Sounds very scalar. And here's what it sounds like when we throw in a bunch of enclosures and approach notes. All right, so today I want to talk about a concept that is very confusing for many of my students. And that is a concept of approach notes and enclosures and how we actually practice them in our jazz lines. There are a lot of different philosophies and methods of practice, so today I'm going to share with you my favorite way of doing this. Now, you've probably heard the term bebop at the very least if you're on my channel, and you know that bebop lines don't just sound like scales, they have a lot of chromaticism and specific language that was played by the bebop masters and really by jazz musicians all the way until now. So it's a really important way for us to learn to improvise, and it makes up a really important piece of most people's educational jazz journeys. So what are approach notes and enclosures? Well, that's just the name that we have given in jazz to essentially notes that we use that aren't necessarily specific notes of our diatonic chord or even scale. All right, let's talk about this. Now, when it comes to jazz lines, what oftentimes is a simple way to understand what makes them nice and melodic, and by the way, this actually also applies to melodies in general, is when we land chord tones on strong beats. You might have heard that concept before. So the chord tones generally refer to the 1, 3, 5, and 7 of any chord. So if it was a C minor 7, we would have 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, right? But it's those 4 core notes that make up the 7th voicing or 6th voicing, the 4 fundamental tones from bottom to top. I love teaching this in the key of C because, well, the key of C is really easy to define visually. Literally, it's just the white notes, right? Those are the notes in the C major scale in the key of C. So whenever we play a black note in the key of C, that means we're actually playing a non-diatonic tone. Sometimes we could also call those chromatic tones. So approach notes then are notes that literally chromatically approach a chord tone from above or below. So if we're in the key of C, let's just look at our E, which is the 3rd, right? Some approach notes might be so if we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this lands right on beat 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. We land on that chord tone, the 3rd, right on beat 3. And remember, I said beats 1 and 3 we consider the strong beats. They're kind of the landing beats, right? And so part of why we use approach notes and enclosures is because I think just as humans, we love to have a little bit of dissonance, especially when it resolves. I kind of feel like that goes for a lot of things in life, not just music. Let me know what you think of that in the comments, because that is a fun and large discussion. Where are other areas in life besides music where we actually really enjoy having some tension and release, right? Because that's really what this is. Dissonance, resolution, tension, and release. It's just more interesting than playing lines that are constantly diatonic. So, for instance, here would be a completely consonant version of a 1, 6, 2, 5. Sounds very scalar. And here's what it sounds like when we throw in a bunch of enclosures and approach notes. Suddenly, it just gets so much more interesting and opens up this whole world of possibility when it comes to that tension and release. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any more videos just like this one. And if you already know and like my content, please hit that like button. Really, really helps me out. Now, just like an approach note is actually a pretty simple concept, right? We just approach the chord tone from below or above. Well, an enclosure is we simply enclose the note or encircle the note with notes around it. So if E, the 3rd of C, is our landing tone here, we could do, for example, as an enclosure, it's a very common one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We land the 3rd right there, just like that. We could also do. And the thing about these little patterns, right, is that we can repeat them around different chord tones. So for example, we have these 3 notes surrounding the E, and we're going. So bottom note, top note, middle, bottom, chord tone. So if we have G, really quick, before I give you the answer, can you figure this out? Bottom note, top note, middle, bottom, chord tone. These are the ones that enclose the G. Now how about the 7? This is interesting because you might think, let me use these 3, right? Because the 7 is B. But we're actually, in this case, doing a pattern where we've been approaching that note from a half step below. So in this case, what we'd actually do is these 3. Because then we're approaching from a half step below. But now you see how these little patterns can be repeated. So of course, we have resources of these patterns and you can isolate them and practice them. In fact, if you want a little approach note and enclosure resource, I have one in my free resource library. You can download that completely for free. Click the link in the description and get signed up if you want to actually download that document. But in this video, we're actually going to get a little bit deeper into how to actually integrate and implement some of this stuff. Because just practicing those alone is not really going to get you to the point of being comfortable having these come out naturally. Now, of course, a slightly more integrated step would then be to say, how can I include one of these little patterns in a lick? And of course, one amazing way of learning to integrate these into licks is by actually learning licks from some of the masters like Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, Barry Harris. There are so many amazing masters to take licks from. And now that you understand what these are, I think you're going to be able to actually listen to their solos and notice these approach note and enclosure patterns all over the place, right? Now, the method I love to teach for improvisation in general is one that does actually force you to improvise basically from the start. And that is the continuous scale method, part of which I learned from Barry Harris techniques, part of which I also learned from Taylor Eichste, who's an incredible pianist who I'll have on the Jazz Lab podcast very, very soon. Excited to share that episode with you. He talks about continuous linear practice as well. And so what I did was I also developed several techniques around this concept. And I really love the continuous scale because, again, it forces your brain to constantly be thinking forward and thinking improvisationally, hearing where you go next. But beginning improvisers, and many of the students I've worked with, they don't know how to always play the best line, but they do know when a line they play doesn't sound that great. And so I think you most likely are also going to know when a line you play doesn't sound that great, where you might actually miss landing on a chord tone and feel like your line was weak because of it, or where you get to a chord tone but it doesn't feel smooth. So one thing I encourage you to do very much is to start with a 2-chord progression. So in this case, let's just try 5 to 1 like we've been doing, okay? G7 to C major 7. And what I want you to do is actually pick a landing tone, and you're gonna work on a lick and see if you can land on that tone in a few different ways. So each time you're gonna try to use a slightly different method to approach the lick, or of course, enclose the lick. But let me show you what I mean. For the first lick here, I'm going to play over the G7, and then I'm going to try to land on a G on the C major chord, which means we're landing on the 5 on C major. So I need to somehow approach from above and close it in some way, or come from below, like that. But we're going to see how this works because we're actually going to work on improvising a line here. So let's just go for it and see what happens. Okay, so where I was coming from, I already hit it. So now that I already hit it, I needed to find a way to get back to it. So I went. Sometimes in these moments, I like my students to stop and think, what are some other ways I could have gone from the G and landed again on the G with the C major? So that would be another one. There's one. Yet another. So you're starting to see all these little patterns we can use to move around the G and make it our landing point. Now I might actually say, what if I want to actually do something similar, but this time I'm going to land on the E on beat 1 of the C major. So Okay, so my ears kind of got me there, but they don't always succeed in that. And maybe as a student, yours might not either. So let's actually look at an example where we don't stick the landing here. Okay. So I kind of landed on the 9 here. I wasn't sure how to get to that 3. So I'm gonna stop, right? And I'm gonna look at how I can actually land on that 3 in the same situation, but now I'm gonna use some approach notes and enclosures. Again, I'm breaking down my own improvisation here because I don't love the way I landed. Okay, so we actually add a little enclosure around the 5 and then land on the 3. So that's an interesting example where we didn't enclose the 3 itself. We actually enclosed the 5, but it gave us the time and space to land on the 3. Let's look at another example. Now there's a good example of landing right on the 3. Here, enclosing the 3. Here's another. Cool, approaching from below. Then I just continued with little enclosure patterns all the way down each chord tone of the C major there. So essentially it's almost like a little puzzle. If you want to get a little more advanced, you can actually add another chord to your lick. All right, so let's make our progression a little trickier here. We're going to do 2, 5, 1, 6, okay? And what we're going to do is our landing points are going to be 5 when we hit the 1 chord. So we're going to land a G on the 1 chord, and then we want to land on the 3 of the 6th chord, so C sharp. So we're going to take D minor to G7, and then we're going to land the G on the C major, and then we're going to land on the C sharp over the A. So let's try this again. Okay, stuck a landing on the G. Didn't love that. That's better. Okay. There's a more classic one. And so what we're doing is we're finding these different ways to navigate those paths. So you can actually set little goalposts for yourself, and you're essentially filling in the rest of the notes and trying to make a smooth line, a nice transition of that tension and release onto the chord tone. This is tricky stuff, but that's why I love having you actually put it into an improvisational context. Again, if you want a nice resource with a few different progressions and different lines that land these chord tones and use approach notes and enclosures, I have a free resource available. Click the link in the description to sign up for the free resource library, and you can download it in there. All right, so that is basically it, right? Hopefully, now that you've watched this video, you understand what approach notes and enclosures are, why we use them, why they sound good, and give us a little bit of a sense of tension and relief, and some really great, kind of fun and tricky ways of practicing them and integrating them into your lines. So remember, when you're improvising, if you play a line that you don't feel stuck the landing, just stop, play it again, take a look, break it down, look if you can use some enclosures or approach notes to stick that landing on a nice chord tone and make your line feel more satisfying and melodic. All right, hope you got a lot out of this video. If so, and you're new here, please click that subscribe button. And also, if you learned anything today, please hit the like button. It really, really helps me and the channel out. And it helps me provide you with tons of valuable content and amazing guests on the Jazz Lab podcast, which I'm also posting here on the channel. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.